Good evening. Thank you for joining the European Movements event tonight. This event is one of a series of events the European Movement is putting on in response to the war in Ukraine. And our focus tonight is on the refugee crisis that has followed Putin's invasion. As it stands on day 20 of the conflict, we know that about 3 million Ukrainians have left their homes to find a place of safety. 2 million refugees have arrived in Poland, and another million are elsewhere in Eastern Europe and beyond. This crisis will have consequences across Europe, and we're already seeing the response from leaders in the EU and the UK to support those millions of families who are now homeless to rebuild their lives. And we're also seeing a huge response across Europe from individuals who want to help. Indeed, in the UK, over the past 24 hours, we've seen over 100,000 families register to offer a place in their homes to people or families who need a place to stay. And that is very much the focus of our event today. Our aim is to hear directly from those who understand this situation best, and to direct our members, our campaigners who really want to help, to where best we can offer that help and support. We're going to hear first tonight from two Ukrainian campaigners. First of all, from Maryna Hovorukhina, a human rights activist who left the Ukraine just this weekend and is now in Berlin. And from Olena Shevchenko, who's still in Lviv and is providing support and shelter to women, to LGBT and disabled people who can't leave. And then we're going to hear from three UK-led NGOs. We're going to speak to Clare Moseley from Care for Calais, from now Hilton from Refugee Action, and from Kate Smart from Settled about the work they are doing and what's working and where the challenges are in response to this refugee crisis. So without further ado, I will hand over to Marina, who can tell us about her experience. Marina, you are a refugee. Can you tell us about your experience in getting to Berlin and how it has been over the past few days?
Sure, thanks. So my name is Marina. I worked in Kyiv as a strategic communication expert for non-profit organizations. And now I'm in Berlin and I'm looking for a house for apartment to rent and try to understand what to do next. I left in Kyiv when the war started, and to be honest, I had a panic. Now in Germany, I still shudder when I had ambulance siren. In preparation for today's call, I asked other refugees from Ukraine what kind of assistance they would like to receive from European countries. And the first things, and I totally agree with colleagues whom I ask, is work permit. Ukrainians did not come here to live on welfare. We want to honestly earn money in order to live and then return home. And now the procedure for obtaining a work permit, information about it is not easy to find. And even if you find, as an expert in strategic communication, I would simplify this information for people. Everyone is also afraid that soon public transportation will no longer be free, and people will not have the opportunity to and means to move even in the instance who could give them provides and assistance. Also, people need to clarify, explain, not in clerical but in human language, how medical insurance work and how the host and rental work for people who want to pay for houses. In Germany, it's a completely dark forest. People need legal support about various aspects, and this should not be done by volunteers, because volunteers, even here, have different position in different jobs, and it's really interesting. So it should be organized and supported, informed by the country. Also, they mentioned a problem with taxes advice. It's also important to get. As for me, I'm ready to help, and I'm ready to be useful for Ukrainian refugees and the country where I'm now. if you need some assistance in strategic communication for Ukrainian refugees, I'm ready to help. Thank you.
That's an extraordinary offer of help, Marina, given that you are too rebuilding your life and setting up here in Berlin. Thank you for that. Olena, would you like to follow on?
Well, yes, thank you first of all for inviting to speak about the situation here in Ukraine. So I'm Olena Shevchenko and I represent the biggest feminist event we had during recent years, Women's March. And I also work for LGBTQI organization in Ukraine still. But before, of course, we did the campaigns, we did the advocacy work, we provided help and support to LGBTQI communities, women, we worked on gender equality. And now it seems like we are totally moved our focus, of course, to the help of those people who trying to escape from the hot points. Personally, I spent 14 days under bombing, thinking that, you know, it will finish soon and everything will come back. I mean, our real life and normal life, but that was not the case. So that's why I take a decision to leave. I brought my family, my parents, and we came here to the Western Ukraine, to Lviv. Why to Lviv? Because we established a shelter here, one here in Lviv, another one in Chernivtsi, a shelter for those people who need it. So basically the profile is pretty obvious for those people who want to stay during a few days and then also receive the food, medications, the place to sleep, and then go abroad. So we also provide support with medications, trying to get them from Poland and Hungary and Romania, and also to send those medications to different people who requested in other cities. And that's also the big deal now in Ukraine, because it's not so easy, to be honest, to bring it to Ukraine through the border, you know. And then also to pick up, you need to have a car, you need to have a driver, and then you need just to somehow deliver it to those people who need it. The same thing, of course, with relocation, because now I'm talking about women and gender perspective, because what we see now, the number of requests for help is so huge. Like every day, more than 100 of those requests coming from women who still there under bombing, still there on the basement. They're still there because they have children with disabilities. They have elderly people. They need to take care about others. That's the, you know, women social position, to take care about others. And the problem, the issue is that at the same time, women are on the position, then they are those victims of rape, sexual harassment, and they can't leave those behind. So basically, they ask us just to find a transportation, to relocate them together with their relatives, their children, people with disabilities. They are asking us to send money to buy at least some food if it's still available, because in different cities it's not even available to buy food, only by cash, and not every shop is open, of course. And medicines, that's a disaster. So I don't know how to try to show you this perspective, what is happening, but believe me, this is a huge humanitarian crisis for the whole world. I can't even imagine what will be next, like during next few weeks, because other countries are already quite overloaded by those people who already left, but it's only 2 and something millions. And we have in Ukraine so many people who left still and who will leave if it will be more escalation, if the war will continue. So it's not so easy to help to everybody. So I don't know if it's a good solution, like the best solution, just to keep, you know, somehow taking refugees. We don't want to be refugees, honestly. We just want to go back home. We just want to have our normal life. That's not a solution. But of course, for those who just want to spend, you know, these few months, hopefully it will end soon, of course. But we don't know. And then it's need to be some places, secured places, psychological support, legal support, as Marina said, because many people, they just don't know where to go. They don't have any skills, I mean, in terms of the English or any other languages. They just speak Ukrainian or Russian and nothing else. We have so many cases now in Poland, for instance, and people just don't get it where to go, what they can ask, what they should do, women with children, how they will go to school or whatever. So it's definitely the huge crisis and huge issue, and I don't know how to deal with that, because like I'm not plan to leave the Ukraine, to leave the country. I plan to stay here because I can help here. And we want to keep going with the shelters, with the support we gave, with medicines, food, and then money and everything we can get. But of course, that's pretty hard because, for instance, even in Lviv, in the pharmacies, you can't find needed medicines for those people who request it. And for children, Pampers, you know, different things that just seems like everything almost ruined. I mean, in terms of the infrastructure. So yes, how people from abroad can help, that would be pretty good if it will be some simplifying procedure for example, to bring needed things here into Ukraine, at least on the border, so we can take them and then redistribute to give those people who need it. And yeah, and of course some donations for shelters for casual people, for those who don't want to leave, who want to stay here and spend, you know, 1 month or 2 months, hopefully it will be enough, and then go back to homes. And hopefully for some, those homes still will be there, but that's not clear now, at least in some cities. Yeah.
Sorry, absolute classic. What's really clear from what both of you said is that the refugee crisis is incredibly complex. So first of all, there are kind of people who are staying put and need that support in Ukraine. There are people who've moved to different parts of Ukraine, and there are people who've moved outside of Ukraine. And you know, and I think what we're seeing certainly in the UK, and I'd like to hear from the other contributors, is really only the beginnings of this, which is kind of how to get people out, the kind of complexity of the bureaucracy of moving people through countries to countries and finding a place to stay. But Marina, you made very clear kind of, you know, actually you're starting to think about the longer term, so work permits and kind of how are we going to live in these new places. And Olena, kind of how are you going to kind of continue this support as it gets more complex and the situation increases? I don't know whether I'm going to bring in the others now. I don't know whether we're quite there yet in terms of the support that's happening in the UK or on the borders of the UK. Claire, can you describe the situation in Calais? I think you just came back last night.
Yeah. So I've spent the last 2.5 weeks in Calais working with people from Ukraine who have arrived there. If you've seen on the news, it was certainly the first bit was very chaotic, largely because our government didn't put good systems in place, and the first people who arrived were certainly messed around a bit, I think, because the visa system wasn't clear. Nearly all the first people that we met that have arrived do have family in the UK. It's very clear that that is the primary reason for coming. And which makes sense because, you know, that is family is so important. And and when something terrible has happened, you are going to go to where your family are. So we have met a couple of people who have come without family for other reasons. I saw there was a question about that in the chat. But the overwhelming majority of the first arrivals, at least, do have family in the UK. And the others do speak the language. That is the other second reason. So it's very similar to our experience with the refugees. That's the reason why they come. It is starting to settle down a bit now. The UK systems are getting better. So I just hope that will continue. The main things that we've been doing, it's not so much the things that they need, it's not so much material things, but what they really need is clear and simple information. So we've been working a lot with Russian and Ukrainian translators, trying to distill what information there is, because it was at the beginning, it was very complicated and changing, but trying to give people very clear information in their own language to tell them what's going on. Even at some points when the information doesn't exist or isn't clear, just telling them that, you know, yes, this hasn't been decided yet, but you're in the right place, you're not missing anything, you're not doing anything wrong. Just that can really help, because when they've had such a bad experience and that, you know, they've travelled such a long way to get there, just being told that you're not in the wrong place and that you haven't done anything wrong can actually help. We've been putting out information to them in French and Russian about the different entry schemes that are available and what they mean, and really trying to simplify that, because that's important. And then just helping with other just day-to-day, the problems of being in a foreign country. So where do they stay that night? How does the public transport work? How do they get SIM cards? How do they get their phone to work in a foreign country? Just any of the day-to-day problems, which is very similar to what we do with refugees in the UK. We have an access team that helps them access legal advice, helps them access day-to-day problems that you have. And I really think that is going to be quite important going forward. And that's what we'll need to continue to do. Because it seems to me that will be the greatest need to helping them right at the beginning. So information, advice, just somebody there that they can ask questions from, and working with the translators to help them get information in their own language. We've actually had an incredible Ukrainian and a Russian lawyer volunteering with us, which has been fantastic and has really, really helped. The issues that we're starting to see, which probably will continue, is where it's not 100% clear where people fall into the requirements of the UK system. So, for example, people that might meet the requirements but don't have the documents with them, which is so common with refugees because people are leaving in a hurry, in a panic, people who lose documents on difficult journeys. So we're starting to see some cases of that, and I think that's going to be an ongoing issue. Cases where people might have been living in Ukraine for quite a few years but don't necessarily have Ukrainian nationality. There's a lot of questions around that and whether they're going to fit into our system. So I think we're going to have to do a bit of lobbying of the UK government to make sure we can get those people in, and if not, find other answers for them. But hopefully first case is to lobby our government and get them in. So I think that is going to be an issue. I guess with any new scheme, there's going to be things that we're going to have to campaign on and get sorted out. We have a couple of people who had refugee status in Ukraine, so they won't necessarily qualify under our system, but I think we need to try to find an answer for them, and we're working with British lawyers to make that happen. So that's I think hopefully the most useful thing that we have been doing and what we will continue to do, and what I see as the most helpful thing that we can do going forward.
Brilliant, thank you, Claire. And Tim, do you want to pick up on some of this too? Kind of what work are you doing? And I think there's kind of big campaigns that you're working on, perhaps looking a bit to the long term. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks Anna. Massive thank you to the European Movement for putting on this event tonight, and great to see so many people attending and to be alongside such a brilliant panel. So I'm Tim Naor Hilton. I'm the Chief Executive at Refugee Action. And as we're watching the horror of this refugee crisis unfolding, I think the question we've been asking ourselves is, how is it possible that the UK government is picking this moment to dismantle the refugee protection system in this country? So over the last couple of years, the government has been allowing the refugee resettlement programme to wither away and die. And at the same time, it's bringing in, it's allowing the asylum system to collapse, and is putting a bill through Parliament right now, right in these weeks that the Ukrainian war is going on. That bill threatens to take away the rights of people going through the asylum system. So the UK government is picking this moment to do that. I would say, therefore, it's not just that this country is unprepared for this kind of crisis. It's the absolute opposite. And Ukrainian refugees, people fleeing Ukraine, are caught up completely in the middle of this. So we've seen a lot of reluctance from the UK government to move on anything initially, to open up any routes, at the same time as watching European countries making much more generous commitments much more quickly. But then we start to see some changes to the family visa approach, but again, very, very limited changes, often heralded as big headline-grabbing moments, but with very, very limited changes, slight expansions of who could be included, but still very limited. And now we've seen, just in the last few days, the Homes for Ukraine scheme, which I'll come on to in a minute. But I think our overall sense is that this is a government driven by headline-grabbing approaches to refugee protection. And we saw it during the Afghanistan crisis last year, and we're seeing it now. And I think the point is that we need a system that works for Ukrainian people fleeing Ukraine right now. And we also need a system that will support refugees from all over the world fleeing every possible conflict zone, and also Ukrainians, depending on how long this crisis goes on. But right now, the situation is not like that at all. So just to give a little bit more detail on where the asylum system and the refugee resettlement program are at. So the UK asylum system, which, remember, is there because not everybody is going to be able to get a visa or to be able to travel to the UK. There are very, very few safe routes for people to claim refugee protection through formal safe routes. That's what the asylum system exists for. And Clare and others have been talking about the potential of people needing to come through those routes. And we will see people in the UK potentially needing to claim asylum who've come through on more temporary entry visas into the UK. But the current asylum system has a backlog of 60,000 cases that have waited for longer than 6 months for an initial decision. We're seeing people in that system left in temporary hotels, former army barracks, and accommodation that's not up to scratch. We're seeing a national narrative pushed by this government of demonisation of people crossing the channel, yet we know that people crossing the channel, 98% of them go on to claim asylum. And the countries that they come from are clearly refugee-producing countries where there are high levels of grant rates: Sudan, Iran, Iraq, Somalia, Syria, etc. And then alongside that, we've got the bill that is going through Parliament at the moment. Despite the lack of safe routes, people who are coming into the country will be potentially discriminated against in terms of the way they're treated because of the routes that they arrive in the UK. We'll see people potentially being criminalised, potentially offshored to different parts of the world. That bill is going through Parliament right now. It will go into it's been through the Lords last week. It will go back into the Commons next week. Unbelievable that this government is picking this moment. Alongside that, we have the refugee resettlement programme. We had an infrastructure up until a couple of years ago, 5,000 places a year, a strong set of relationships with 100 plus local authorities and the infrastructure in place to support people. That system had been in place. It could have been used really easily for this crisis. It still could be if it's revived properly. And I think Marina and Olena have both flagged up those really kind of practical issues that people deal with once they become refugees. How do you get into the job market? How do you understand your legal rights? Some of those really practical day-to-day things. So just to talk a little bit for a moment about the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So this was launched yesterday. It's really new. We still have loads of questions about it, and those haven't yet. The clarity and the detail isn't quite there. It's an unbelievable public outpouring of support. I mean, it's just incredible. It blows you away, the number of people who've just expressed an interest in providing a room or a house for people in the last 24 hours. But this kind of scheme has to be complementary to a more formal refugee resettlement scheme. You need to be able to have that kind of formal support that people can access. And the point is, it still needs a visa. The process that people have to go through will require them. And in fact, it's even more complicated, because if you haven't got a link directly to the UK, you need to find one. A sponsor will need to name somebody at the moment in this first phase of this rollout. So it can't be a substitute for a more formal refugee resettlement scheme. And what we're seeing as well is that there may well be very, very limited checks on the people who offer accommodation. The accommodation could potentially be quite inappropriate. And also, we're looking at a scheme where instead of the matching being done by government departments, it might even be done by the people themselves who want to become sponsors. And that kind of idea of pick a refugee is really, really uncomfortable, leaves open lots of issues around potential trafficking, but also means that those who don't have the right connections could potentially just not be able to benefit from this scheme. As a result, because there isn't this wider scheme going on, a wider refugee resettlement program, there's a real risk that this Homes for Ukraine will be used as the primary method for people to get into the country and to be given protection. But that commitment means potentially that the commitment that the government have made around the scale and the speed that they want the numbers to be able to come in, that this program could end up being abused. And so we need to be really careful, but also to commit to those other programs. The other area that we are concerned about is around stratification of different refugee groups. So the bill going through Parliament at the moment creates different layers of refugees depending on what route people have arrived in the UK to seek protection. But what we've also seen in relation to the Ukrainian crisis is we've seen Black people living in Ukraine experiencing differential treatment at some of the borders that they've reached. We've seen reporters talking about a language of civilized and uncivilized, where the war is taking place, and making comparisons with places like Iraq and Afghanistan. And the question that we're getting asked by, for example, Afghans who have either come out, evacuated from Afghanistan last year, or who are still stuck there, is what about a Homes for Afghanistan project and scheme? That isn't on the table at the moment. And, you know, before this crisis, in media interviews, I was asked constantly that question by journalists, which was, why don't people just stay in France? And yet what we're seeing right now is Ukrainians coming to France, wanting to come to the UK. And for all the reasons that Clare has mentioned, and all the really good reasons that we know, but we're not getting asked those questions anymore by journalists. That empathy with why people might want to come to the UK clearly is there. And what we want to see is that empathy for the wider refugee group. So just to finish off, I think the main points are, we need a system, a refugee protection system that works and is effective. We need a commitment to refugee resettlement of at least 10,000 people a year, a scheme that could work for Ukrainians, first of all, right now, but then also for future crises. We need an asylum system that treats people with dignity and doesn't differentiate. And what we really need to do is we need to throw out the Borders Bill that is going through Parliament at the moment. Crucial day next Tuesday when it goes back into the Commons, and particularly the clause, what we're calling Clause 11, which is around the differential treatment of people through this bill. We need to throw that legislation out and create a system that is fair for all, including the people fleeing Ukraine. And we have a email your MP action that I would really love lots of you to be able to take, that will encourage your MP to be informed and be able to vote against the bill and the key amendments in the Commons next week.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to ask at the end for everyone to give some recommendations of things people can do right now. And Tim, I suspect that action will be high on your list. Kate, just to finish then, could you, I know that you at Settled have worked very quickly to get a new service off the ground. I wonder whether you could just talk about what you at Settled are doing very briefly, and then we have some questions.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Firstly, thank you very much for taking an interest in what we're doing. And also Marina and Olena, if I can say on behalf of everybody that I think is listening to this call, we are holding you in our hearts sincerely, and we wish you well. Okay, just very quickly then, a flavour of what's happening at Settled. I think the, a headline would be really that it's very hard to help people without clear government processes. There's no substitute really for the government having a clear sense of direction and making pathways for people to get here. So Given Ukraine's proximity to Europe, Settled has been advising people from Ukraine who are the family members of EU citizens in the UK since we were set up in 2019. Ukrainians, like other family members, have the right to settle in the UK by acquiring a family permit under the EU settlement scheme. Settled has 2 Russian speakers on our staff and 2 Ukrainian volunteers, and we're right now in the middle of recruiting a Ukrainian staff member to boost our capacity. When the war started, we realised we could not easily advise people unless there was this clear route by which they could come to the UK. The only visa centre handling the cases that relate to the settlement scheme was in Kyiv, and it was closed. So although there were some announcements from the government about pathways to come to the UK, they were only covering family members of British citizens. And often announcements were not really being matched by concrete Home Office guidance, which is the thing that you really rely on when you're advising people. So Settle started to argue very loudly for, firstly, including EU citizens as people who could sponsor family relatives to come over under the new Ukraine family scheme. So that's in addition to the EU settlement scheme. And secondly, to create online processes for doing so without the need for people to be in those queues at the visa centres. Because we knew that without those things in place, it was very, very difficult for us to advise people on how to get here. Thankfully, the Home Office listened, and those 2 things have been incorporated now into the process. We've set up a service that's Settled. Initially, it's email advice only, or at least inquiries by email initially, and then we can phone people back if needed. And we will probably add a phone line once we've seen how the email system works. We've done this with very, very little funding. We don't really have the funding to keep it going. We just wanted to do it. So one thing people could help with, please, is fundraising for Settled. Obviously, our charitable remit is EU citizens in the UK and their family members. But of course, we're getting calls from people who are Ukrainian and from British citizens too. And where we can, we're helping in those cases as well, given the circumstances. Calls so far have been about the practical difficulties of the visa process, people struggling to upload documents, struggling to answer some of the questions, or just lacking internet connections if they're still in Ukraine. People are very, very concerned about the delays in the process for getting those visas processed, especially where people are applying for unaccompanied children. Bearing in mind, of course, that dads cannot cross borders with children. There are cases now where, you know, if it's the father is the head of the household and there is no mother looking after the child for various reasons, the dads have got very little option other than to leave children alone at the borders. And also we're getting cases where people don't quite fit within the requirements of the scheme that the government has offered. So just this afternoon, for example, we had a case of a lady who was over here as a seasonal worker, you know, digging vegetables on a farm. She's gone back to Poland, she's gone back to the Ukrainian border to collect her 3 children. They are currently in Poland. She has the right to return to the UK. The children do not. The children are not covered at present by the government scheme. So that's, you know, there are still going to be people like that who are outside of the arrangements that the government has made. The biggest issue then really, in summary, is that the visa scheme that's been set up is not a quick and easy process. I had a call this morning from a journalist who was asking us about people who've now been reunited with family members in the UK from Ukraine. And I said, well, actually, everybody that we've been dealing with so far, those family members have not yet arrived. They are still in the system waiting somewhere with the delays in the process. And then finally, of course, as Tim was saying, yesterday, there was an announcement about this new Homes for Ukraine scheme. And, you know, it's a privilege to be here with Tim. Refugee Action, as people probably know, is an organisation that has got more experience of providing resettlement support than any other in the UK. But the scheme that's been announced, as it stands, seems to completely lack any structure or expert leadership being provided by the government. And it's very difficult, therefore, to see how this scheme is really going to work. There's an enormous amount of goodwill, but you do need those structures in place and that expertise and leadership. And so at present, of course, like lots of people, Settle is getting calls from people either wanting particularly calls from people wanting to take in somebody from Ukraine and knowing how to do it. And we're having to say at present that we just don't have enough information on how the system is going to work to give them that advice. So that's a very quick run through of what's happening at Settled. I would say in conclusion, it still feels like very early days. This is a crisis that's going to continue to unfold. The response in the UK is going to continue to unfold day by day, and we're just watching what's happening. And then if I can just really end, because I know there's been so many comments put in the chat, I think if people have got offers of assistance that they think matches what Settled is trying to do, please get in touch with us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kate. We've got a few questions coming through, and there are about 200 people, I think, listening in. We have kind of, hundreds of thousands of members of the European movement, and they want to know what they can do to support and to help. And you can see that coming through in the questions that are being asked. Before I pose some of those questions to you, the panel, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that you have described. In particular, Marina, Olena, you talked about the elements of safety. Obviously, people who have left their homes have been through an enormous amount of trauma. Those who are not leaving but can't leave are also kind of facing trauma. And some of the support you need is psychological support. You need places of genuine safety. And I know that some of the concerns around our Homes for Ukraine system is about kind of where is the safeguarding element in that. There are concerns at the borders about safety. I'm just interested from all the panelists, anything more you'd like to say on that issue of kind of how we keep people safe and how we create a refugee support system that is genuinely supportive and safe for those who need a safe place to be. I don't know, Olena, do you want to pick this up? Because I know that this is a big part of what you've been doing with very vulnerable people.
Yeah. That's a very interesting question, because honestly, my answer is that it's not possible, because the whole concept of safeness, of safety is now under threat. That's not possible to give people this, promise that they will be completely safe. That's not true. People just, coming from the basements, living there few weeks, and then somehow get to the Western Ukraine in those, I don't know, you saw, I guess, those trains full of people, sitting, standing, laying down on other people, with children, with pets, and so far and so on. And then they are coming here to the Western Ukraine, and that's not the safe place, especially for women. We don't have separate spaces. That's all together, like on the train station. They just a crowd of people living there, sitting there, sleeping there. So that's not about safety. But talking about other countries, this is the hell. For many people, this is just like the whole life is ruined. And we still don't have enough time, even just to stop, for instance, to have some time to analyze what is happening. Because in my case, I'm just reacting. We just keep working to support others. But I can just imagine how huge crisis will it be afterwards in psychological system as well for many people. That's a disaster. And totally agree about, different countries' system in terms of asylums, in terms of refugees. That's what I observe now. Then I have time to think about that. That's now the war in Ukraine, and many countries opened somehow the borders for people to come, refugees, see? But why it never happened before with other countries? Because it never happened before with Afghanistan, with Syria, other countries, because they are not like enough white, I guess.
Yeah. Are there others that want to pick up on this question? Tim?
Just, yeah, I'd echo everything that Olena said. I think the first thing that that people need is to be able to get out and to get to the UK easily, and it's the kind of requirements around visas that we need to limit and reduce, and there needs to be easy ways to leave to enter. We also need people to have refugee status when they arrive, because that's the other thing. All kinds of different statuses are being suggested, including it's not going to be refugee status for people coming through this new Homes for Ukraine scheme. But once people are here, a lot will depend. I think Marina was saying this, on how long people think they're going to stay. Some people will be looking to put down roots. For some people, it will be seen very, very temporarily. So we need to have bespoke support for people, and it needs to be grounded in whether people want to work and understanding the UK job market, how to get children into school and understanding the education system, understanding their legal status and what that means and where that legal status might potentially change, but also a lot of support around mental health. I mean, the levels of trauma that people will be experiencing are huge. So I think the really important thing, whether it's the sponsorship type approach or a formal resettlement program, is that those levels of high quality support are available to everybody.
Mm. Yeah, and Marina, I just wanted to pick up on something you said, which was really quite arresting, which was that you are a strategic comms expert and you're a gun for hire. How can you help? And there's something quite important about kind of, what you do next. How can other countries help you to kind of rebuild and kind of what does that look like?
Right now, I'm already working with some organization from Ukraine. I helping them to communicate, for example, a law in the war and what happens, and how to create the post for Facebook, for Telegram, and so on. So I continue working with Ukrainian organization. And right now, I was in a project with OSF, and OSF has support for the person who worked with them right now. For me, it's now I don't have any special needs. I just have special needs to help and to continue help the Ukrainians who come and who didn't understand what to do, because it's really, I'm lucky me that I know English, not excellent, but I know I can explain something. But today I have met with a woman who don't know English at all. And all she wanted to do to understand how to register it, where to go, and so on, and she don't know anything. And she meet volunteers. Yes, she meet, but somebody say to her that not all the volunteers are safe. So maybe some dangerous volunteers, and they want you involved in some criminal and so on. And she was very scared about this. And it's really, it was in some news that really some suspicious person are on the train station and could use refugees for some, I don't know for what. And for such kind of people who has a problem with the language and with who are very new, who first time come to European countries, they need a very understandable support. And they need to understand, so if I come, who is the official representative, to whom I should go first, because a lot of people on the train station, I came from Lviv to Poland, and then I from Poland to Berlin, and I meet a lot of volunteers who wanted to help and so on, but it's not understand what is the official, to whom I should go to get an official help, and so on. And it's very important to understand for people with a simple language where they can have official help. Just this. Sorry, you're muted.
My goodness, I'm good at that. I wanted to pick up on that point about language, because a couple of the people listening have been asking about their language skills and how they can put them to use. So there are a couple of people who say they speak Russian. Is that okay? Can they help? Kind of where can that be useful?
It's very useful because almost all Ukrainians understand Russian, and they appreciate it for a help. It's not, oh, you're talking Russian, I will never take your help and so on. No, they appreciate for all the help.
Yeah, of course. There's a very direct question here from Jane Khan, who says, how can we help the shelter in Lviv? Olena, what do you need? How can we help?
Well, it can be different kind of support. So I already told that we still trying to get some contacts, from those companies or maybe volunteers or organizations who can bring us medicines, at least to the border with Poland or with Romania, because we have 2 shelters. It's medicines, it's also some furniture, mattresses for people just to sleep. And so that's like in-kind contribution. But you can also support us by donations, because we still need the money for the rent, for the food, for the everything we trying to buy for them. And also we provide direct financial support for those people who are still not relocated from those hot points in Ukraine. I mean, from different cities, they still stay in there. Yeah.
And do you, is there a place where you're accepting those donations that you can share at the end, so we can share it with the people who are online, where people will accept that, where we can direct that financial support or any donations?
Yeah, we have it in social networks, in Facebook, Instagram. We also have Twitter, so I can send you the links.
Fantastic. Yeah. So there's some questions here about the UK system too, where from Mache. He says, Priti Patel promised relaxing visa requirements. Can you see any progress in that direction? I don't know, Tim, Kate, Claire, are you seeing any movement?
I mean, I can answer that because we've been following this quite closely. Yes, that is the answer. I mean, yes, that day by day there have been changes to the visa requirements, since the war broke out. So it is moving in the right direction. But I think what's been proven is that any kind of visa system, it requires a delay. There is if you have a visa system, then you have a delay of some sort. They've not yet got to the point where they have amended the system enough that people can do it very quickly and get a quick answer, and that it's not difficult to meet the requirements. So there are still problems.
And maybe a related question to that. So I guess kind of a question about what the UK system looks like from Ukraine, so President Zelensky and the fighters say they're very grateful to the UK for the weapons we've supplied, financial sanctions, but does our bad treatment of refugees, the sort of barriers we're putting up, risk ruining our good name? Is that something that you are aware of in the Ukraine, or not?
I don't know. From my point of view, from my experience, I just don't have a sense like we can talk in general about these perceptions or those conditions which exist now in UK for our refugees, because we just don't have a data. So I guess we need to wait and to see. But as far as I know about your legislation before, let's say, the recent development, it was awful. Even I once wait for the visa to go to the working meeting, I guess more than few months. So I can imagine how it's not really possible for those who are trying to come and to live at least some time in UK.
There's also a question about public opinion is this a point where we can start to shift public opinion about refugees and immigration? Should we be seeing it like that?
Should I come in there?
Yeah, I think Tim, that's one for you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think because we're seeing such an incredible outpouring of support and just understanding and empathy of the experiences that people go through when they become refugees, the kind of moment of horror and terror and the difficult choices that people face, and then the challenges people face once they try to find a safe haven and then settle there. People are seeing that in real time on their TV screens. And I think this is the moment to be able to not just support Ukrainian refugees, but also to expand that out to a greater public understanding. And it's so important. And I think that's why we need to shift the narrative more broadly on the bill that's going through Parliament, so that we talk about a refugee protection system that works for all. So yeah, absolutely.
And just following on.
Sorry, can I just add on that though? I think yes, at the moment we're kind of on a high of this outpouring of concern where people are offering to open their homes. It's absolutely crucial that it goes well. You know, it's not automatic that experience is going to go well, and it will need, as I was saying earlier, you know, it needs experts and it needs infrastructure to make it work. Because if people's experience is disappointing, you know, then actually, you know, the mood could turn very quickly.
And so, in this moment, there's a question here about what is it that public figures, politicians, influencers can do to help? What message should we be promoting to try and shift opinion? Kind of what is it we need to be doing now? Not us as individuals, but those people with influence and power. Maybe Claire, and then I'll ask you all to come in on this. I think so. Claire, and then Tim, and then Kate.
For me, one of the biggest things is that the messages that we've spent the last couple of years trying to do a bit of myth busting on have been blown out of the water without us even trying. And, you know, after years of being told that the numbers crossing the channel were unmanageable, and that 30,000 refugees in a year was, you know, more than the country could take, we're now saying 200,000 isn't a problem. And we need to use that. What Tim said about, you know, we were being told that they all had to stay in the first safe country, and now everybody's realised that actually if they've got family here, it is perfectly reasonable for them to want to join their family. I think we really need to make the most of that, and, you know, not let anyone forget that these things that we've been told have been really proven to not be true. We need to make sure that we sustain that. And most importantly, actually, what Tim said before, we need to get people writing letters to MPs right now for that vote next week, because that is an incredibly important vote for all refugees. And the timing is, I don't know, more than coincidental that the piece of law that will hurt all refugees the most is going through next week. So if everybody could push on those letters to MPs next week, that would be amazing for everybody. For all refugees.
Thanks, Claire. Tim, do you want to add anything to that?
Just to back that up, absolutely. You know, the main message that influencers can take on board is that the British public do want to support refugees, do want a refugee protection system that works, and that is so inspiring. And we need to now back that up with the policies and the legislation. And the absolutely crucial thing, as Claire says, is this bill and the key amendments in it need to be thrown out next week. And so yeah, we massively encourage. I'm hoping that a link's going to get posted in the chat to email your MP, and I massively encourage you to do that and to pass it on to your friends and family as well, because we need to get the message out next Tuesday. Probably next Tuesday is the key day.
Great, thanks, Tim. Kate?
Well, if they're going to stick with the visa system, then quick and easy. It has to be quick and easy. And as I was saying earlier, you know, given that they've just announced this homes for a Ukrainian refugee scheme, it needs expert leadership and structure. you know, it can't be a free for all. That's the risk at the moment. So yes, they need to recognise that the government has a role, and the government needs to resource the voluntary sector and those experts in the voluntary sector to have a role in making sure it's a success.
Thank you. And to Olena and then Marina, you know, what would your message to those in power, you know, to EU leaders, to UK leaders, to influencers, what do you want to see from them? Or is that too big a question given what you're going through right now?
From me, I can say that we appreciate it as the refugees what they're doing right now, because they're really doing a lot, but they can do best. That's my message.
Yeah. Olena.
Honestly, I don't think that I will comment this question, because I'm been a human rights defender, and the person who, you know, had the huge belief in the international system. I don't feel like I believe in it anymore. So I don't have a message for those people. But for casual people, yes, we are so grateful, you know, for any support you provide us. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that was going to be my final question, and I think the way to end tonight's meeting is, if you know, we will share the links, we will kind of share the campaign actions with our 180,000 campaigners and, you know, our members across the UK. So what is it that people can do? It's write to your MP by Tuesday. It's provide direct support to those on the ground in, you know, the shelter in Lviv. And what else? What are we missing that you need our people to take away tonight?
I think that it should be, you know, we all know how it happening usually with different wars. Then from the beginning, it's a huge interest and a huge informational support everywhere. In any country. We see now that for many people it is still on the first pages, of course, and we all know why. Because Ukraine is a huge country, and everybody understands that after Ukraine will be other countries. There is a high possibility of that. So the Ukraine is now like a buffer between this evil and civilized world. But then it's not enough. That's not enough just to, you know, somehow support it and keep doing everything you do in your normal life. Because then I came from Kyiv to Lviv. I just experienced that, because I just came out to the street and saw almost normal life. And people just have different experiences. And this is the case, this is the reality. And now almost 40 million of people will have such different experience. And it's a huge number of people. And the war is not finished, and nobody knows when it will be the end. And nobody knows who will be next, for instance. So I guess that the international community and other countries need to just come together and figure out what kind of new system we all need, because the old one, obviously, it's not working. That's just fucked up. So yeah.
Exactly right. And perhaps we'll leave it there. And on those notes, absolutely, this is a time when countries need to come together. So the UK, the EU, no matter whether we're in or out, we need to work together. We all need to stand shoulder to shoulder. And I want to say to Marina and to Olena and to all of your compatriots in Ukraine, we see you, we stand with you, we absolutely are in solidarity with what you're going through, and the European movement and everyone here tonight kind of really holds you, as Kate said, in our hearts. I want to thank every speaker here, Claire, Tim, Kate, Olena, Marina. Thank you so much for giving your time tonight. To all those hundreds of people online who have joined us tonight, we will share this online afterwards, but we will also share all the links and all the places where you can support And the European movement has a homepage where we can guide you to places where you can campaign and support with us. So please do that. And thank you for joining us tonight. Good night.